Hi, Junior Church kids. Welcome to another week of Virtual Junior Church. I'm glad you're here with me today. Today we are going to continue our story through the book of Joshua. We're on Joshua's chapters 3 and 4 today. We're going to talk about how the Israelites finally get to enter the promised land. If you remember last week, the spies were sent to check out Jericho, but they were still east of the Jordan River. I need to point this way because on your map it's to the right side of the Jordan River, and they were getting ready to cross over. And today they are going to cross the Jordan River and enter the promised land. But before we get into the Bible story too much, I want to remind you about the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, I'm going to show a picture here that shows what it would have looked like when it would have been made. It was completely made out of gold. It had figures that looked like angels on the top with their wings touching. And it was inside of it, they kept three things. They kept, remember how Aaron's staff had blossomed and had almond buds on it? That was one item that was put in the Ark of the Covenant. A second thing that was put in were the stone tablets that Moses got from God, where God wrote out the laws for him. So that was the second thing. And the third thing in the Ark of the Covenant was a jar with some manna in it that never went bad, that God had them preserved to remember how God provided it for him. So those were the three things. And the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be like the seat of God, like it was supposed to represent God's presence. So it was a very, very special object that was that nobody was. It was supposed to be so special that nobody could really even look at it. So when they were traveling, they would cover it up with blue cloth, a special type that was waterproof and very well made, kind of like we would use a tarp, but they made a really fancy one to make sure to show how nice it was. And so they would put that over the Ark of the Covenant, and they were never supposed to touch it. Obviously, it was touched when they made it, but once it was consecrated to be the special Ark of the Covenant, nobody touched it anymore after they got everything in. And so and it could only be carried even by poles. And nobody could even touch it to carry it. So they had little rings and holes on the sides where a pole could be put through. And then they could use the poles to carry it. And only the priests were supposed to carry it. And they're supposed to always carry it by walking. They weren't supposed to put it on like a cart with wheels on it. They were always supposed to carry it. And only the priests who were in the tribe of Levi were allowed to be the ones to carry it. So those were all the special rules for the Ark of the Covenant. And the reason I wanted to tell you about that first was because the Ark of the Covenant plays an important role in today's Bible story. So the Israelites were all camped out east of the Jordan River. And yesterday they were farther east, not quite to the river. They were just kind of in that region of Moab. Well, then they traveled. Remember last week we talked about how Joshua said, in 3 days we're going to start going. Well, in 3 days they went, but they just got to like the edge of the Jordan River, and then they stopped again. And then they said they had another 3 days, and then they were going to actually cross the Jordan River. And during those 3 days, they were supposed to get ready, and they got special directions. Because remember, there's probably 1 or 2 million people, so it took a while to get everybody the directions so they knew what to do. Up till that point, they'd always been led by God by the pillar of cloud or by the pillar of fire, and that would tell them where to go. Well, God said on the day they were going to enter the promised land, they were going to be led by the Ark of the Covenant. So God would tell the priests, or maybe Joshua told the priests, I'm not exactly sure. I think he told Joshua, and then Joshua told the priests, because I know after they get across, Joshua tells them when to get out. But the priests were the ones that were going to be leading everyone. So the priests were going to carry the Ark of the Covenant, then everyone was going to follow them. Now, something you need to know, they are on the east side of the Jordan River, and they want to get into the promised land, which is on the west side of the Jordan River. However, at the time they were there, it was flood season. And as you know, we've had a lot of rain around here lately, and maybe you've seen some roads or some fields that are flooded. Well, normally at the section where they were at with the Jordan River, it was 3 to 10 feet deep. So 3 feet's not too bad. You could walk through that and get your animals through and probably not have too much problems. But 10 feet's pretty deep anyway. But then with flooding, it would make it even deeper, and would make it wider, and it would also make it so the water was going down the river faster. And so it would be hard to even walk without getting knocked over. I don't know if you've ever been in a body of water where there's a really strong current, but it's sometimes even hard to just stand because the water pressure is pushing you out so much it makes you want to fall over. So what was flood season? So the Israelites were not going to be able to cross the Jordan River on their own. They needed God's help. So what God told them to do, and he told all the commanders to have everybody tell them to follow the priest. Now they were also told not to follow the priest too closely because that Ark of the Covenant was so special. They were all told they needed to stay 3,000 feet away from it. That's over a half a mile. So they were supposed to stay over 3,000 feet away from the Ark of the Covenant. And one thing, if you'll notice, all the pictures that are shown with Ark of the Covenant and the people, it does not show them 3,000 feet away. So those are bad pictures in my mind, but I can see why they did it, just because it's easier to draw them close together, because it would have been hard to see far away. But I wanted to make sure you knew that the pictures are wrong, but it just helps you remember the story better. So remember that in your mind, that they were a lot farther away from the priest and a lot farther away from the Ark of the Covenant than those pictures show. But so the priest went in. Joshua told the priest to go ahead and start walking towards the river on the day they were supposed to go. And when the priest started walking into the river, and Joshua said, just go in the middle of the river and stop. Well, the priest started walking, and they were probably not sure why they were supposed to do that, but they started walking, and they never got wet. As soon as they started walking in, the water just backed up and made a wall back. So it was just, in fact, I like it in the Bible in Joshua 3 and 4, it says the water heaped up and piled up in a town upstream. And so the priest never got wet. They just had that wall of water there. The priest stood there in the middle of the river, completely dry. And then all the Israelites started passing, making sure they stood 3,000 feet away from the priest. But they all were able to go across the river. So all just like they did when back in Exodus, when they were with Moses and left Egypt and they crossed the Red Sea, God does the same miracle again and holds the water back so they can cross the Jordan River. So it was kind of a couple things. First of all, remember, it's all new people in Israel. Joshua and Caleb were the only two people that were there to see the Red Sea part. So God is showing all the Israelites this new way to or reminding them of what the stories they'd heard about their parents with the Red Sea being parted. So they are seeing firsthand and seeing with their own eyes the fact that God can hold the waters back and do this amazing miracle that they never could have imagined on their own. And then also, it was a way to show all the people around. Remember how Jericho, in last week's story, how they spies learned from Rahab that the people were scared and trembling for fear of God because they heard how powerful he was? Well, God is showing them. Everybody there would have known that water got backed up because that water was just flowing. And remember, downstream, it was going to look different for a while because all that water wasn't rushing down. And then, so just wanted to let you know that part. So the Israelites all went across, and then Joshua gave another set of instructions. And remember how there's the 12 tribes of Israel? Joshua told one person from each tribe, before they went across, they were supposed to select a leader, and somebody strong, and you'll see why in a little bit, to go, and when they were crossing, they were supposed to get one big rock. Now, as big as a rock as they could carry from the middle of the river, and from the riverbed, and they're supposed to get it and carry it on their shoulder and take it to the other side of the river. So that's what they did. One person from each tribe got a rock and carried it over, and then when they took it over there, Joshua piled them all up and made a monument to help remember. And he said, whenever your kids and your children and your grandchildren ask you why these rocks are stacked here, you remind them of what God did for you today. Remind them how God stopped the water during flood season and made it so all of us Israelites could cross over the Jordan River. So that's what they did. And then after everyone had gotten through on dry land, they walked completely across, no getting muddy, nothing getting wet. And that's another thing, if you'll notice, some of the pictures show little patches of water on the ground. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that it was completely dry ground for them to walk on. And so they all got across, and then Joshua told the priests that they could come on out too after the 12 rocks were stacked up. So the priest came out, and as soon as the priest crossed over, got to the other side of the river, all the water just fell right back into place, and the river started flowing again. So it was definitely God's power that was stopping the river.